welcome to Complexified, where we jump billions of years into the future to see just how resilient humanity can be. I'm Cameron Fokins, your host, with...
Justin Nilsson, co-host.
All right, and huge announcement before we get started here.
Big announcement. I'm going to be the one to do it because it is my thing. Well, our thing, but my thing.
This is his sect.
Yeah, this is where I start becoming a little bit more than just the co-host. We would like to formally announce the release of the Complexified YouTube channel. Yeah, it's been a request that we have been given quite a bit because some people don't like podcasts, other people don't have time for podcasts, but everyone watches YouTube to my knowledge.
Yeah.
So, and the reason why we've waited this long is because the other topics that we were talking about didn't necessarily need visuals. We were able to, we were able to give you guys a perspective of how massive the hate was with just description in the last video, or when we were doing the Halloween special, it was more informational. But with this video, you really need visuals to understand what's going on and how severe what's happening happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely, and you guys will hopefully see what we mean, because when we get into the descriptions of some of these humans, we'll call them.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. And you guys you'll see what we mean when we can't, describe the weight of what's happening and stuff like that. But yeah, so it'll be a interesting endeavor. Hopefully, you guys enjoy that.
And if anyone anywhere sees our first video, which hopefully should be up today, if I can figure out how to do all of that. If not, it will be up very soon. I lost my train of thought.
Well, just Merry Christmas, Happy New Year too. 'Cause it is New Year's Day,
or
when this
whatever
comes out.
holiday you guys.
Yes, Happy Hanukkah. What's the other one?
Kwanzaa.
Kwanzaa.
Whatever you guys celebrate it. I hope you have
happy atheists.
Yeah.
If you're none of the above.
I hope whatever you guys got yourselves was very nice. The Santa deniers need to stop.
Honestly, bro, it's a severe problem.
Everyone would have to be in on it in order for. Anyway, I remember what I was gonna say. If anyone out listening has more YouTube experience than I do, feel free to send suggestions our way. I'm gonna be posting at some point a questionnaire on Instagram for you guys to put your constructive criticisms there, because I know there's going to be a lot of them.
Yeah, for sure. So what better way to start? So today we're going to be talking about it's not necessarily a short story. It's really just a book.
Yeah.
It's called All Tomorrows. It's about the future of humanity. It's like billions of years of progress. And
it's whatnot. A billion-year chronicle starting from now and to the
basically
end.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're going to break this into two parts because there is a lot to cover here. And we thought it'd be, interesting for a new year. We could look to the future of humanity, right?
Very, very far future.
Yeah. So yeah, we're going to break it into two parts. And for this first part, we're going to do about half to 3/4 of the book. And then in the next episode, we'll cover, the ending. But trust, don't worry. There's plenty we're going to be going over this episode for sure. So, it's a book by a certain, and I'm butchering this name, C.M. Kozman. His pen name, I believe, is Nemo Ramjet. He's Turkish. He's a Turkish writer. That's why I think the name is, I messed it up. But he's a photographer as well, and he's also an artist. So all the pictures you guys will see on the YouTube channel, he was the author, the illustrator of that, as well as author of the book. And he also made books like All Yesterdays, which was kind of like reimagining what dinosaurs may have looked like, based on their bones, just to show like,
A different perspective, because I'm not sure if any of you guys have seen like a rhinoceros skull or a hippo skull.
or an elephant skull looks like a freaking giant with one eye. Like,
Yeah, and so and how future civilizations would piece together those skulls, like how we did with dinosaurs, and how they did not look anything like what they actually. So
yeah,
that's an interesting. We might cover that. We might not. Let us know if
yeah,
you guys want to.
yeah. It'd be interesting to look over, but that's just kind of like background. Like he does speculative biology, which is just kind of speculation, kind of guessing how things will evolve and develop and whatnot.
With his own
Creativity.
and twist, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of his own
Oh
creativity
yeah.
in this book.
Yeah, and this book is a little less connected to reality, we think. But he uses this speculative biology to create all tomorrows, which uses it to, as well as science fiction,
Yeah.
to kind of map out the future of mankind. And where the book begins, as Justin said, is near future. It's when the humans were starting to colonize the solar system.
Well, it starts off with the expansion to Mars, and the way the book depicts it is our the first people to step on Mars weren't astronauts in spacesuits, but children walking onto fresh grass because they terraformed Mars before we got to it.
Yeah, like so if today we started sending, I don't know what, nukes
To the
and
poles.
yeah,
Yeah.
like if we started terraforming it using machines now, and then like in a couple hundred years, maybe a
The
thousand
the
years, we made
planet's
it.
habitable with oxygen,
Yeah.
trees, grass,
So then it was
water,
just a matter of like, hey, who wants to hop on this flight to Mars? A
and
couple
you
months.
become a colonial.
Yeah.
Fun fact, there was a loophole in the UN's property over astral bodies where no government organization is allowed to claim any territory on the moon or Mars. Now, this gets interesting because just because it says no government organization does not mean no person. So this
Yeah.
man wrote a letter to the UN and to NASA saying that he was going to take claim of said plots of land on the moon and Mars, and they never wrote him back. So he assumed that he could just take it,
Yeah.
and he's sold over like 1.4 million dollars of land on the moon and Mars.
Wow.
Yeah.
No,
I mean,
so
all things considered, the astronauts that get there first, I mean, they got there first, so they
yeah.
could kind of just take it if they wanted it. But
Yeah.
it's like,
No, dude,
it's
like
a cool thought.
the geopolitics of space are probably going to be the most interesting part of space travel when
Yeah.
it arrives, at least at the beginning, right? Like,
Well, okay, I feel like the beginning
because
would
at
be,
some point we're going to own land on the moon.
yeah.
And at some point we're going to have to divvy it up between governments, right? Like it's going to be such an interesting look into that, how that's all going to work, but and maybe we'll do an episode on it one day. Um
Oh, and I got two more things to announce before we start getting into the real meat of this. I had completely forgotten. We got the button.
oh yeah.
We got the Complexified That For Me button. We don't have AAA batteries, so in the next one, you guys will have the button in its full glory.
Yes, and it'll be wonderful. Maybe, or very annoying. I don't really care. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. And the second thing, James Webb launched. Well, okay, in the
It
time of
yeah.
recording, it hasn't, but by the time you guys listen to it, it launched. So hopefully something crazy's happened.
Eye out for a current complexities episode coming soon.
Yep, that is a spoiler that you just created right now. I didn't even know it was gonna happen.
I didn't either, but now I want to do an episode on yeah, we will
Eh,
definitely do that.
yeah, once
Yeah.
that can be the March episode.
Yeah,
Yeah,
easily.
cool. All right, sorry about that tangent. I wanted to address that before we start getting into the really interesting stuff. So now what Cam was saying about the like geopolitical stuff when it comes to the astral bodies, aka Mars, Moon, whatever. Um, it caused it obviously leaves potential for war because people would want land. But backtracking it, uh, when the first humans got to Mars, as colonials, they set up their homes, and cities grow and whatnot. Because of the difference in gravity on Mars, the humans actually evolved into adapt to uh,
Yeah.
that environment,
So
and
they got like redder like skin and wider eyes, and they got a little taller.
bigger noses so the
Yeah.
nostrils can intake more
More.
air
Yeah.
because the atmosphere was is thinner. Um, and it's an
And,
interesting illustration that will be up now.
and yeah. So that's the the Martians, and this is, I forget the time scale. I forget how long they were on Mars. It might not have even been that long, but you
Yeah,
can see like it's not
it
too
was
different from
only
a
a couple
human. Yeah.
generations.
Like it's not too far off from just your average human. And that's just, as I'm sure we all are aware, that's just enough for a
Yeah,
race war.
and that's what happened. Well, was it a race war or a resource war?
It was a little bit of everything because, their race changed and they're
Yeah,
on a different planet, so their culture changed like drastically.
yeah,
So they just stopped considering themselves Earthlings and
and
became, it's kind of like, the US and
yeah,
Britain.
and and so, as we've been foreshadowing, space war happens. Star Wars, whatever you want to call it. And the way the book depicts it is it's not exactly what you'd think. It's no grand space battles and starships shooting at each other with lightsabers. Instead, it was more strategically placed attacks
It's like
on planet and in space,
with like automated machines
and the death toll was immeasurable. It completely dwarfed the death tolls in,
of like all like we're talking billions of lives were
yeah,
lost in this war, and it lasted like hundreds of years, I think.
and by the time the war like ended, humans were almost extinct, and as a result of that, the leftover survivors had changed their politics because they did not want any chance of humans becoming extinct to even happen ever again.
Let
So
alone by their own hands.
they spread out further, and this is where the millions of years comes. They start terraforming other planets. They discover, because all this time is going by, they've optimized space travel to the best it has ever been ever. So we're reaching different corners of the galaxy, and these new humans are called star people.
Yeah, so they genetically engineered a race of humans that was going to be just an everyman, I guess. So no matter what planet they went on, their bodies were built for it, so that there was never a chance of like changing races ever
Yeah.
again. Which is pretty human.
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah.
Like, like war is always the same. And racial issues will always be present in humanity, and
Does that
differences are always going to be like
is that almost
unreasonably large of a problem
is that
to
almost
humans.
like outbreeding, like the inferior, almost like a genocide, but like through breeding instead of.
I mean, yeah, kind of. I think they commented on something about this in the book where it's like there was still like some people that thought it was like wrong to outright just, standardize the race and turn it into star people. Um, but I think they eventually, yeah, just got outbred, kind of like the
Yeah.
Neanderthals were.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so and that's generally what happened in the first, act of the book. The human empire, right? And it's still very connected to everyday politics. Like, I mean, granted, it's pretty much an outbreeding of old
Yeah.
humans, but it was for the greater good of humankind, and they never had wars again.
And
Inner fighting, that is.
that's not to say that racial issues weren't always present, because they were. Because diversity would never have been 100%
Yeah,
accepted.
so cultures are still going to be different. There's still
Yeah.
going to be, yeah, like, oh, those people in the Orion's belt they're the worst.
Oh
Fuck
yeah.
those guys.
And those people in the Capricorn system can't be trusted.
Yeah, no, they're dirty fiends. But yeah,
I'm a Capricorn.
but still, despite all that, there was never another, civil war among humans again. So they never really developed their weapons, you know. So they were just chilling. They were expanding in the Milky Way galaxy, having
And
having a grand old time.
and then with the expansion comes the discovery of alien life. And
Yes,
alien life wasn't
pretty
what
present.
yeah, it wasn't what you'd expect it wasn't like humanoid like aliens that, little green people with big black eyes. They their everything down to their like cell structure was different. There for example, there was this one planet that they had gotten to where as we have calcium bones, their bones were made of a copper like
Substance of some
and
kind.
and and that's for example it was the differences were all the way down to the bone.
Yeah. Yeah, and so but there was no sign of intelligent life, however. Life was present in the galaxy, but most of it was just, animal at best, like multicellular life, at best.
Yeah,
Um
maybe like grazing livestock,
yeah,
like
exactly. But what was interesting is on that same world with the copper-boned aliens,
there was a fossil found.
which was not made of copper, but instead of calcium, of a creature that they believe was from Earth.
And now it they tested on it and it was proven shared DNA with earthlings. It was an ancestor of
Like the dinosaurs, like a
yeah.
very old fossil. But
But the problem with that is how the fuck did that get there?
yeah,
How did it
it's
get
like we're
there?
talking like interstellar differences, like on the span of the galaxy. How did something from Earth
Get there.
light years away? And it was at this point that humans were like,
Oh
"Oh
my god.
shit!"
Like
Like, there's
there's
there's another intelligent life form out there somewhere.
that has had intergalactic travel.
When we were just not even,
We
we
weren't
weren't
even
even, yeah,
yeah, we weren't.
mammals weren't a thing yet. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, they were, but they were like rats. Basically, our rat ancestors were chilling when these guys had interstellar travel.
Fun fact, uh our last link this is real life, not the book.
Yeah,
Our last link to squids is like what? Like 4 billion years ago or something? No.
I can't remember. I think it was like 400 million.
It's something crazy like squids are almost completely different.
Yeah, like they're so far off from us.
Yeah. And that ended up sparking a conversation between Cameron and I where we were trying to figure out like the most outlandish like life that there is, where
Where our
our
last
last
ancestor
connection.
was.
And I ended up asking him where were we connected to oregano?
Yeah, and I could not find it, so I was just like, all right, when are we connected to trees or whatever? And
It was
it's pretty much
like
when
before
cellular life
yeah,
split off. So
from like animal and plant
plant cells,
cells.
yeah, and the cells have organelles.
Now, the star people, they find this thing, this species that they are 110% sure brought this fossil to that planet had to have been millions of years more advanced. So they decided to start developing weapons. And these weapons were insane. They could blow up star systems like nothing. They and they were preparing for a theoretical attack.
Yeah, for fear of like, I mean, and that's human nature, like fight or
Yeah,
flight. We were just being, they were making sure to be ready for whatever comes. So if we have weapons that can destroy stars,
we
if
should be
these guys are
fine.
dangerous, we should be set. Sure enough, the worst happens.
And they were right. There was another species, and they were called the Q picture.
And they are, huge religious fanatics.
Very, very Puritan. Very,
Yeah.
very. Hey, I told you, you got to be the one to compare them to the Nazis, not me.
So they're very Nazi-ish. So yeah, they were like, they believed it was their divine right to shape life in the universe as they see fit. Yeah. So that meant, oh, these humans are just these animals, these creatures that we can just turn into whatever the hell we want, right? And they were trying to reshape the universe as they see fit, and that meant destroying human society.
And
They
so,
took out the star people
like
like
nothing.
nothing. Our star killing weapons were millions of years too weak,
It's
undeveloped to
it's
face
it's
these guys.
physically unfathomable
What?
how
Yeah,
powerful the Q.
had to have been. Yeah,
And you know, and we didn't even stand a chance. Like the in these great battles, the only planet that was able to survive
there was two planets that were able to.
fend off one attack, and then one planet that
Yeah,
was able to fend off two attacks. Only two attacks. You know how many times whatever attacked whatever in World War II?
yeah. No, exactly. So it's like, but every other, and we're talking light years here. We're talking like millions of star systems,
Across
just
an entire
and only
galaxy.
like two or three were able to
Yeah, because
fight
we
off.
at this point in time we had colonized the entire galaxy. Like the next step was going to Andromeda.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah. Like we had a good chunk, and it was stripped. It was taken from us.
and so their divine calling was not only to destroy human society, but genetically modify them into these grotesque, unimaginable abominations.
That you're gonna see if you check out the YouTube channel. This is where you kind of need these visuals here, because what we're about to get into is grotesque and unimaginable. So this, yeah, and the Q, they have this complex in their brains where they feel this need to their what's the word I'm looking for? Their
God
divine
complex.
right, like yeah, like divine purpose.
Yeah,
They just have this grand idea in their heads of what
like
their destiny is,
their destiny is to be,
digs.
yeah, like the only intelligent life that there is.
Yeah, exactly. They saw themselves as gods in the universe, which they kind of were.
And so they go and they take these humans that they left off, and with these genetic modifications, we'll start off with the people that we had told you that had fent off the attacks. These leftover humans. Well, yeah, leftovers is a good word.
I mean, so they were around. So when the Q chilled for like millions of
Yeah,
years.
they occupied,
Yeah,
like it. They had occupied, and then for
for some reason
just
unknown,
left.
they just dipped.
Yeah,
They left the Milky Way, probably presumably to go
fuck up Andromeda.
fuck up Andromeda, and they just left their creations to rot essentially.
Yeah,
And these humans are those leftovers. So yeah, so
I think
those
leftovers is a
people,
good word because you know how when you eat your meals, like they look so good when you start, and then when you throw them in the box, it just looks all fucked up, like not what it
yeah,
used to be.
yeah,
That's what these.
that's what these people are. Yeah, so like, there's the star people, which kind of look, humanoid, right?
Almost.
Yeah, they just got big foreheads. They're a little short, I think.
Yeah.
And then you got the colonials, which the colonials are those humans that I think they fought off two or three attacks from the Q.
Yeah.
And the Q were like, oh, you think you're brave, huh?
All
Oh,
right.
check this out, bitch. And
And
then
they
and they turn them into bricks.
literally, and like, okay, so imagine like okay, if you could imagine Oblivion or Ohio, um, just a flat surface of nothingness. Now replace the grass that everyone's thinking about, and put bricks everywhere. It's bricks all over the ground. Now these bricks aren't made of stone, but they are made of flesh. Like look at your hand, look at the skin. That's what these bricks are made out of. They got one eye and one mouth, and they were used as living filtration devices for excrement.
Yeah. They were, so in layman's terms, they were bricks of flesh with, I think they just had an eye and a mouth, and they just ate Q feces.
Yeah,
They
living
they were
toilets.
toilets. They were living toilets, and they were fully sentient.
Yeah, full. Oh yeah, they wanted to punish them. So
Yeah.
the colonials were completely sentient. They had the knowledge, like
of their destiny and their past and all
and
that.
they knew exactly,
What they were.
and they were also built to last. They were built resilient, and so these colonials could not die.
Yeah. And we'll see they live on for millions of years, millions and millions of years after the Q leave. And yeah, they yeah, essentially just living toilets. And another example of one of these modified humans is the predators and prey. So the predators were kind of like werewolf types, vampire-ish types. They kind of like walked on two legs, but they're they eat meat.
Yeah,
They're predators,
carnivores.
carnivores, and they hunted their prey, which is another human species, which was just grazers. They just kind of like antelopes almost.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, that's just that's a sick game the Q had fun doing, I'm sure. And yeah, so the predators hunted the prey, humans on humans.
and that was basically it. That was their life.
Yeah, that was just
And they stunted their sentience. They
yeah,
were
they were just
animals.
yeah creatures.
Now,
Um,
the lopsiders, they were put on a planet. They were almost like a test experiment. They were put on a planet with immensely high gravity. So they had adapted to thick bones that were being like pressed against the surface, and they had one extended hand that they could use to like scoop food into their mouth. And like I wish I could, physically describe what these creatures look like, but you'll just have to, watch the YouTube video if you're not already. Watch the YouTube video.
pancake people with what, three hands
Yeah.
to move around on, and then one that protruded out, and
Oh yeah,
they
their feet were just hands connected to their asses.
yeah, it's sick. This thing is sick. Um, so yeah, they just kind of wandered around the plains, I'm assuming, of this planet they were on for
And they would use their other
ever.
hands that weren't for like scooping food to like imagine like if a fish were to just move its fins to try and slide
Yeah,
across the surface if it was laying on its side and not like jumping around.
yeah, yeah, exactly. They were just awful. They were
It,
disgusting. And sorry, that's pretty much it for them for now. We'll see more of them later. And then we have the bone crushers, which were kind of like human-like, and they had like a limited form of
they
sentience.
they were only allowed, their minds were altered to only be allowed to evolve to a certain point, which is what primitive humans were with like tribes and
Yeah, yeah.
but that's about as far as they got. But
Like Far Cry Primal. That's
yeah,
like their level.
but they only ate rotting meat.
Yeah, again a form of punishment from the Q because
That was the only thing that they could
it was
digest.
just fun. They were just like,
Yeah,
let's just make a creature that can do this.
and they communicated with one another by waste, pissing, shitting, spitting.
Yeah, just like yeah,
And
like isn't that just
obviously,
a sick game?
yeah,
Like you can only eat rotting meat and you can only talk to each other by
shit.
shitting on each other.
And so, well, once you run out of rotting meat and that's the only thing you can eat, you're
You
gonna start
starve.
starving.
Yeah,
So they went extinct.
they went extinct because they couldn't, make enough rotting meat to keep their primitive civilizations running.
And because they couldn't evolve to a higher civilization and discover agriculture, that was it.
Yeah, so they just died out right there. Um,
The Titans.
Titans.
The Titans are cool. They are elephants, but they have okay, human like lips, but the lower lip protrudes down into like a trunk. And they half remembered past humans and told roaring stories of what it was like living with the star people, and what the scary stories of what the Q did to the humans and whatnot.
Yes, and they actually started to build something of a civilization as well. These big fleshy elephant-like
Yeah,
people.
all
They
these
would,
creatures we're telling you about, imagine flesh. Don't imagine
yeah,
like elephant like texture.
yeah,
Like imagine flesh.
yeah, and they started to build another primitive civilization. They had like campfires where they would tell these stories of old humans and the Q and whatnot, and they were doing okay for themselves. They might have become something one day, but an ice age hit the planet, and their fleshy outsides just couldn't keep up, and they died out. Brutal universe out there, huh? And then another clade of humans that the Q created was swimmers. They made a bunch of different types of aquatic
It was in like it was like a
humans.
water planet filled with
Yeah.
fish people, just a bunch of them that were fish,
Yeah. There was like squid types, eel types,
dolphin,
dolphin types, all that.
goldfish.
But they were so like bizarre, such bizarre creatures that they
Yeah,
they struggled to find niches once the Q left them alone.
yeah. Once the Q left, they
Mostly died out.
because they were for the most part domesticated,
Yeah. Yeah, just kind of like fun little science projects for
like
them.
like goldfish.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, so the swimmers kind of mostly died out,
All but the dolphins.
all but the dolphin people, which kind of look like manatee, dolphin,
Yeah,
mermaid-ish, fleshy abominations.
yeah, like yeah,
Yeah, and that's essentially it for them. And then you got the lizard herders, which were limited form of sentience, still pretty human. They still looked
yeah.
pretty human.
They looked pretty human, but they were only allowed to reach a certain level of sentience.
Yeah, they made it something in their brain to where they couldn't learn things for themselves,
Yeah,
like which is what humans do. And these guys would evolve eventually to become domesticated by the lizards that they had been herding. Right, once the Q left, the lizards eventually evolved and then started to domesticate the lizard herders. They became animals,
yeah.
which was pretty interesting. And we'll see more of them a little later.
The
We
mantelopes
also
are cool.
the mantelopes. Oh mate, this is a sick fate too. The mantelopes are just these kind of like antelope shaped
Yeah,
humans.
like a tiny giraffe.
Yeah, and they're fleshy, obviously. And the Q made them singers, and they retained full sentience and full memory of all that's happened to the humans and what the Q have done to them. So they would roam the plains of this planet and
Mourning.
just singing songs of old of what has happened to the humans, feeling depressed, and they could communicate to each other in some form. They're fully sapient,
Yeah,
sentient creatures. But because they're antelopes, they can't really do anything about it. They can't build society like that.
yeah,
So eventually, the humans, like when the Q left, the mantelopes that were dumber and like didn't remember as much started to become the more successful species based on evolution, right?
wasn't there like a suicide rate or something?
No, there wasn't really suicide. It's just like when you're like a happy-ish mantelope was going to be more successful than like a
Yeah,
mantelope that is depressed and sad all the time. So eventually, the ones that remember the past just died out because it wasn't suitable. It wasn't survival of the fittest. The fittest were not the memory people, so they eventually just became dumb
yeah,
over time, which is a good fate for them. Let's be honest. That's
yeah. I mean, ignorance is bliss.
ignorance is bliss. Exactly.
All right.
Then we got the tempters, and these. Take a look at this thing.
Okay,
It's
so the lower half that you guys are looking at stays in the ground. They're about 2 meters tall, and the lower half stays in the ground. And that tube, that canal that you see going out and up, is actually like a urethra.
yeah,
And these big things are treated as like queens almost. And the little creature that you see to the right, I think there's a creature to the right. I'm not too sure.
yeah,
They go and they burrow into these urethras, and that's where they mate with these creatures.
and they die.
Yeah.
By the way, the little men gimp things,
Yeah.
they jump in there to their death, and then that recreates another queen,
Yeah.
and they kind of functioned as like hives and colonies, communicating through like sounds that they make, which I can't imagine what this thing sounds like. Ugh. Just yeah, so they were treated as kind of like plants, little plants for the Q.
Yeah.
And they were Yeah, but when the Q left, they started to overgrow. They would fill the planet with like trees. They would fill the planet like trees do. And for a while, they were going all right. And then one day, an asteroid hit the planet,
And kablamo.
and kablamo, they were all dead. The author of the book writes like, oh, they might have become something. Who knows, that their hive type, thing might have become a society one day, but didn't have the chance.
The parasites. They
And
fought
yeah,
off the Q for a little bit and obviously was punished. They were forced to be attached to hosts in like a symbiosis, in a symbiotic relationship. And most of
well,
these,
most of them, there was a lot of different types, and they were all parasites, but there was also like symbiotic
yeah,
relationships too.
and most of the ones that were not symbiotes went extinct. Whilst the symbiotes kind of, and all right, for our Marvel fans out there, it is not like the Venom symbiote. I don't know. There's this one fungus that does a similar thing where it takes control of animals. It's a real thing, and so these parasites take control of their hosts, and they kind of have like a the symbiotes get the hosts to do what they're supposed to be doing for survival, and the hosts keep the symbiotes alive.
Yeah, yeah. They both gain from the relationship, and those were the ones that reigned supreme. All the other, you know, types of parasites died
Died
out
out.
for the most part once the Q left.
Now,
And then we have the worms, which were on like a hot planet, and they were just built into worms. I
well,
mean,
so here's what happened. They burrowed into like caves during the Q attacks to hide out, and when the Q found them, they were like, oh, you want to be in caves? Okay, become a worm.
yeah. So they made their like legs and arms basically become like flippers for digging, and then they have like essentially no eyes and just a mouth. So they just kind of dug aimlessly around this world and then ate everything in their sight, even other worms, other human worms.
It was very cannibalistic culture.
Yeah. Um, and that's all we'll see for them from now. And then we also have the flyers, which were humans that were turned into basically like pterosaurs. Is that what they're called?
Pterodactyls.
Pterodactyls. I can't believe I forgot that. But fleshy like
Yeah,
that, you know?
you guys will see.
Yeah. And they had like huge hearts that could pump blood to like enough blood and create enough like oxygen.
To where they could support their weight in flight.
Yeah. And even like larger brains.
Yeah.
So they were just flying around booling on their planet for a cool minute. And then we also have the finger fishers on another planet, which caught fish with their long clawed like fingers, basically. You had the hedonists, which were like pets. They're like
It was
pets
like
that were household pets to the Q.
yeah, it was almost like a science experiment. They'd given them a complete paradise. Like they're the only animals on the planet, stable food, stable everything. It was, a paradise. And you'd think, oh, well, in that situation, that would leave room for overpopulation. But the Q thought of that. Uh, they literally would have to mate in a measurable amount of times in order for,
In order to actually reproduce. Yeah.
yeah. So, and I mean, all that's all they did was dance and fuck. And
Yeah.
because they were living in a paradise, they had no reason to.
Evolve intelligence. They
So
just
they
mindlessly, like, they were empty minded sex maniacs. They had no natural predators. They were the
fucking
only living
perverts.
thing on that planet, you know? Um, and then we also have the insectophagi, which had, claw hands and long tongues and tough skin on their faces to eat bugs.
Like leather almost.
Yeah. And all they just ate bugs. They were bullying eating bugs everywhere, like anteaters.
Now, these next species is pretty interesting. They're called the
Yes.
spacers. They escape the Qs. They escape the Qs attack by hollowing out asteroids and making homes out of them. And they moved around by, like, inside these asteroids by gas or farting.
Yeah, so they would just like there's just like this appendage that they use that was they just farted and then they would move around. But and they had like long,
Oh, and they had
skinny,
control of their
spindly
farts too.
hands. Oh yeah, for sure.
Like
And
they could
they
fart
use
on
these long,
command.
skinny hands to like move around asteroids and whatnot. And yeah, and they were just chilling in there for a long time, and we'll see more of them later.
I wish I could fart on command.
That'd be pretty sick. And then the final one, well, there was many more, but
The final one that like's worth note because
yeah,
like we the humans colonized an entire galaxy.
yeah,
There
there's
was a
an
lot of them,
entire
but
yeah,
they didn't amount to anything, so there was no reason
yeah.
to note them.
So a lot of just note that a lot of human of these like leftover humans died out. A
Like
lot of them,
millions of species.
yeah,
Like unimaginable. I couldn't even fathom what some
yeah,
of these species look like.
impossible. Yeah. So I mean, the Q were around for millions of years. Yeah. So there's probably humans on every planet in the galaxy, and they're all these abominations. And some of them, probably, a lot of them probably died out because the universe is an unforgiving mistress, and and uh, and a lot of them probably made civilizations and died out, or uh, just are stayed animals like the mantelopes
Yeah.
forever.
Now,
And go ahead.
now these last primitive species that we're going to address are probably one of the most interesting ones. They were given ape-like intelligence on a world that had the ruins of the star people. So they had all this information, all this technology that they were able to start accessing once they had reached a higher state of consciousness, and they advanced very quickly.
Yes, indeed they did. And we'll see more of them a little later. But yeah, they wandered the ruins of the Star People, and yeah, we'll see. We'll see
Yeah.
them soon. And then we get into where these all these human leftovers, go on to be. And we'll get into that in a second here. All right, I'm so sorry about that. We had some technical difficulties there,
And urinary difficulties.
and but we're back, and now we'll get into the new humans, the new empires that have formed. So first off, the snake people. If you remember the little worm dudes in the hot planet that just walked around, or I guess dug
Burrowed.
around, yeah, aimlessly and ate anything in sight. Well,
They ended up evolving into snake-like people with human intelligence. They enjoyed music and vibes and whatnot. And they also have a hand at the end of their tail for like grabbing.
yeah, yeah, they're like extra limbs that they use to dig, turned into like a hand of some sort, and
They developed a pretty advanced civilization.
yeah, and their day-to-day lives were not too far different than like our lives are. They were remarkably human, and they again, they loved music from vibrations in the ground and all that. And then we also have the killer folk, which were they were evolved from the predators, which were the ones that hunted the other human prey. And they have such a rich history. I think in the book they said it was an archaeologist's dream,
Yeah.
because I mean they're predators. They're meat eaters. They had very violent and hunting like culture for millions of years, right? Like they had like wandering like native no nomadic tribes of just war parties. They would just go around fighting all the time. They weren't really, they didn't have agriculture for a long time until one of these tribes. I mean, so yeah, like it was very common for like empires to rise and fall over these thousands of years of history, and then one day one of the tribes invented factory farming, and this tribe would start to reign supreme, and they rejected the ways of old, or they started to want to work cooperatively and in unison with each other, and that gave them like a worldwide civilization, and they were living large.
The next people evolved from the swimmers. Now, uh, they couldn't create fire because the whole planet was underwater. So they bred these creatures to use as tools, and so that they've coined the name tool breeders. And it's not just creatures like tools that they were using. They bred houses, weapons, bioluminescent creatures to use as lights, TVs, energy grids. All of these were like they had blood flow and organic. They were organic. Their cities, their spaceships, everything that they had created were bred into creation. They're living. They're alive.
Yeah, so like their cities were quite literally one giant organism. Like their energy grids were just giant hearts that would pump, you know, like not materials, but like what's the word I'm looking for?
Uh,
Minerals
yeah,
and vitamins
nutrients.
and nutrients to all the living houses and TVs and street lights, all of which were just bred for their part. Remarkable. That's it's awesome. And then yeah, they
They
eventually
managed to
made yeah.
reach the stars. Well, okay, is yeah, it's awesome. It's incredible, but it's also inhumane.
I mean, could you say that?
Well, okay, how were the creatures treated? Because
Yeah.
I mean, all things considered, they're no better than the Q.
Yeah. That's a good point. But they're not crazed and they're not demented by some divine purpose. They're
Well,
just
yeah, it is survive. It is for the means of survival. So they're not like
so to
crazy,
I
but
would imagine it's like I mean, would you say building a log cabin is inhumane?
fuck.
As a
Okay.
living creature, we just used its corpse. It's actually worse. We use its
Yeah.
corpse as a house, you
Okay.
know?
All right. Maybe.
Or like when we dig up fossils of long dead creatures and turn them into just gasoline, you
Well,
know?
okay, yeah, but these creatures also have like limbic systems and cardiovascular, blood vessels and whatnot.
Yeah, but it's symbiotic, you know. When they're all when it's a living city, all of
Yeah,
the things get all the nutrients that they need to survive and live. But when they survive and live, it's for the purpose of, you know,
imagine like an
the swimmers.
alcoholic swimmer, and he gets mad and he fucking punches his wall, and the house goes, "Oh fuck!"
I would like to picture that happening. That'd be great. And we got the Soro sapiens, which were so if you remember the lizard herders that eventually became like, you know, like
Pets.
pets or whatever to the lizards that they were herding. um, so they, they were raised and evolved in human remains of cities, and they know what the Q like. They learned that they were attacked by the Q, right?
And they'd feared that they'd come back later on.
Yeah, so that's why they never really like they treated the humans as trash
Yeah.
as well. And I mean that's pretty much all there is for them. Nothing crazy
The
happening.
modular people,
So if you remember the colonials,
the
the
bricks,
brick, the living toilets, once the Q left, they plagued like a fungus. They covered their entire planet with just
them.
fleshy bricks.
And they were built to last, so there was just
Yeah, just tons of them. And again, fully sentient for all of this time, for millions of years. These brick people would just do their thing. And
and they ended up like evolving into different colonies, and the colonies were diverse. Some of them were like moving houses that would topple to attack. I'm assuming, and others would use like one colonial as one piece of a big, like
yeah,
almost like the if you could take off your finger and put it somewhere else.
and then replace it with like a knife.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's and so obviously that the second example seems very very versatile in that it was, and they ended
that
the
ended up being the like version of the colonies of
that
colonials that would reign supreme on this planet. They,
and that's why the word modular comes, because they're modular. They're able to interchange all their different parts. If
yeah,
you need a new heart, you don't need a transplant. You just remove and put in,
yeah, and they, they're very old and very wise.
because of all the torture that they had been
Yeah,
through for
so
millions of
and to
years.
survive, they have to work together as a whole. So they created a utopian society where everyone is completely grateful for the place they're at,
Which is
and which is
incredible.
yeah, that is a remarkable example of human tenacity, right? Um, then you have the Ptero sapiens, which were the flyers, evolved into these guys, and you know, they lived on a world where they were flying humans essentially. They borders and like nations didn't really make sense to them if you could just fly over them.
Yeah.
And they had very short lives of 23 years old was the average death.
So they valued life living to the fullest.
Yes, and so they developed intelligence and civilization, and they were very unified. There was probably very little war in this world, and because they lived very short, because their hearts could only support so much flying and big brains, like. But yeah, they were hard workers too. So then you have the asymmetric people, which were not
Created.
evolved but created by the lopsiders on that high gravity planet. So the lopsiders eventually made like pancake size like
Buildings
buildings
and
and civilization on their world, and then they
made the asymmetric people go to the moon.
yeah,
And the asymmetric people created their own civilization on the moon. And
and then they wiped out, they exterminated their creators.
they hated they like the hate that Am had for our you know
For our hardcore listeners there.
yeah they had the hate that Am had for humans, but for the modular people.
Yeah.
Not
For the no,
modular,
the
the
lopsiders.
asymmetric, the lopsiders, and there's a lot of people. Sorry, and so then the asymmetric people completely wiped them out, and then
Went on to have their own spacefaring civilization.
yeah,
Yep. And then the symbiotes were evolved from the parasite people, and the symbiotes were the ones that reigned supreme on their planet, and they eventually had a society where they no longer needed to have their hosts on them, but
they were almost like a change of shoes. Like
yeah,
you'd wear your nice host to a family gathering, and you'd wear your workout host to
yeah,
the gym. Like
exactly. And because the symbiosis became so like intertwined that they basically became just one being.
yeah,
The parasite being completely in control, and
yeah,
yeah, it was, and they kind of just wore them for tradition. They didn't really need to have their hosts, but yeah, and they became spacefaring and all that. And then we have the sail people, which evolved from the finger fishers, and this is probably one of the biggest stretches in this book, because the finger fishers, they had just one, or I guess on each finger they had one like huge appendage that was good for catching fish. It was basically a finger, and eventually they just kind of became giant whale people with sails.
yeah.
Sure, okay. And they were on a very diverse and lively planet, so there was a lot of competition, including among themselves. So yeah, they were like the hunters, the predators. They have a very rich history with tribal warfare for thousands of years. And eventually, one tribe kind of
Unified them.
unified them all. Then you have the the Satyriacs.
They evolved from the hedonists,
Yeah,
and geology killed most of the hedonists.
yeah,
Landslide,
yeah,
earthquakes, monsoons, tornadoes. But a small amount of them broke the breeding limits. They realized that fuck shit was not gonna fly.
yeah. So just the mutated the like reproduction limits out of their system. They basically became like they could actually reproduce at a reasonable rate. So that meant they were actually having a chance to evolve into something more. And then they made their civilization of the Satyriacs, which were sex crazed, sentient beings now, not just animals that had sex a lot. They were like fully aware
And they still
creatures.
wanted it.
Yeah, and they got their shit together. They
Yeah.
buckled down, made a civilization, but are still having a good time. And I mean, mad respect, I gotta say. Then you have the bug facers, which evolved from the insectophagi, which were the guys that ate all the bugs. So their faces hardened into like jaws like mandibles, and they had like hands and feet that evolved into like crab like pincers. And then they started to look a lot like their bug prey.
prey.
They looked like bug. They had bug faces, right?
Yeah, their leathery faces harden into jaws.
Yeah, basically exoskeletons. You know,
Yeah,
you almost couldn't tell that they were human
yeah,
at one point. You know,
their hands and feet evolved into pincers on like appendages, and they developed intelligence. They built civilizations, and what's interesting about them is they were actually attacked by a different alien race, and it caused a huge series of wars. And the bug facers like just barely made it out. It was a very big toll to them, and as a result, they became xenophobic to future civilizations trying to reach out and create a
galactic.
intergalactic
Yeah,
government sort of thing.
exactly. And they yeah, they were super xenophobic, which means they were just
Afraid of aliens.
afraid or just hated other aliens. So
Yeah.
so they kind of kept to themselves. And
Those
then you
fucking
have
bigots, xenophobes.
racists. Then you have, think about it. This is a very diverse cast of humans here.
Yeah.
We have far less races of humans on Earth, and we still can't get it
Yeah.
together, man.
The craziest thing is these civilizations don't even know
That they
that they're
were, yeah,
humans.
related, well, until
And
later,
they
which
well
we'll find
okay,
out.
and you'll find out why it's ironic later.
Yeah.
But
Then you have the asteromorphs, which were they evolved from the spacers, which were the fart guys that traveled in asteroids and farts.
they were the ones that escaped the queues. So
Yeah.
the steromorphs had the millions of years of human advancement into star people, and then also the millions of years between
Yeah.
the Q attack to the Q leaving.
Yeah, like they were never genetically modified. They just naturally evolved that way from humans that lived in space.
So their intelligence grew exponentially.
Yeah, they are the wisest being in the galaxy at this point. They're because they're in space, gravity isn't hindering their brain development. So they evolved these giant heads. They could make complex thoughts for us today, like huge like calculus problems and stuff. They could do like a computer.
Their everyday thought was far more complex than the most complex thinkers of today.
Yeah.
Like they dwarf AI.
Yeah. And they've been mostly keeping to themselves.
They didn't interfere with
Yeah.
any other species because they saw what the Q did and don't want to bother creating something
Yeah.
big because it's not worth it.
Exactly. They saw that they were not to interfere with anybody because of how powerful they were. And they don't bother with planets anymore. They couldn't even go on them if they wanted to, but they just don't care for planets anymore either. They kind of looked at the other humans as themselves, granted, but just also kind of lower beings because they're so advanced at this point. And that's what we have for the new humans here. And there's one or two more
There's
that we're missing, but you'll have to find
Yeah.
out in the next episode.
Deliberately leaving out. Just keep this in the back of your guys' minds. Remember, there was an entire planet populated by people with ape-like intelligence, with star people-like technology.
Whose civilization will evolve, or sorry, whose technology will evolve faster than their society can keep up. Ponder that for another month. So thank you guys very much. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to check out the YouTube video if you haven't already. You'll have visuals for every one of these abominations.
Courtesy of my pain and suffering.
And then we'll revisit this and we'll come back and finish the story after this next month. And I think a lesson we could pull from this is just human tenacity, right? Like,
Stubborn ass fucking species.
yeah, like they have been manipulated beyond recognition and spread it so far apart across the galaxy, and they are still alive.
I'm
right?
going to rip every last atom of this universe apart to wipe your stubborn
Yes.
species off the Thanos be like.
Yeah. And it's remarkable, like humans will always find a way. Like we see it, like all these other humans that die out were dying out because of, events they can't control, like an ice age, an asteroid impact, geology. Like the universe is a violent place that wants to kill you, right? But humans found their way. They were created to not evolve. Like they didn't want the hedonists, for example. They wanted them as pets. They were never supposed to become smart,
And they did.
and they did. The modular people were toilets, human
Yeah,
toilets that eventually, through millions of years of toil, became a utopian society, which is remarkable. But thank you guys so much.
we love you all.
Love you guys all. Check out the YouTube channel.
And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.